The cabin door creaks open in the Wyoming dawn. Jesse Hale steps forward, thinking freedom lies just beyond the threshold. But Silas Boone stands waiting in the yard, Colt revolver gleaming in the morning mist. "Hello, Jesse Hale." Two more hunters emerge from the shadows. The trap has been set all night. Jesse's hand hovers near his gun, the same hand that touched Eleanor Whitlow's skin just hours before, the same hand that finally learned to stay instead of run. Behind him, through the cabin window, Eleanor clutches her late husband's Winchester. 51 years old, silver threading her auburn hair, she'd believed herself too old for love, too old for the kind of passion that makes a man choose death over dishonor. But here they stand, three hearts caught in the crossfire of desire and justice. The bounty hunter who once wore a badge, the outlaw who abandoned his best friend to hang, the widow who dared to love again. Now, what price will they pay for one night of forbidden fire? Tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from tonight? Winter gripped Dry Willow like a fist. Eleanor Whitlow split kindling in the fading light, her breath white puffs against the Wyoming cold. 7 years Jacob had been in the ground, 7 years of clockwork solitude, chores at dawn, mending by lamplight, prayers that felt more like habit than hope. She glanced at his photograph on the mantel, then turned away. Some conversations were too heavy for evening light. The Winchester rifle hung above the hearth, dust settling like snow on its barrel. Jacob's gun, Jacob's rules, Jacob's woman, even in death. The irony wasn't lost on her, a weapon gathering dust while danger prowled these mountains like hungry wolves. Hoofprints in the snow caught her eye, fresh, leading straight to her door. Night had fallen full when the stranger arrived. Eleanor heard him before she saw him. Boots dragging through snow, labored breathing, the soft thud of a body against her door. She stood frozen, poker in hand. Decent women didn't answer their doors after dark. Not to strangers, not alone. The knock came again, weaker this time. 3 heartbeats of hesitation. Then her hand turned the latch. Jesse Hale nearly fell into her arms. 26, maybe 27, with the kind of rough handsomeness that spoke of hard living and harder choices. Blood darkened his pants leg. Snow melted in his black hair. His eyes, gray as storm clouds, held gratitude without a trace of pleading. "Ma'am." His voice was sandpaper and whiskey. "Just need shelter for one night. Won't be any trouble." Eleanor's gaze dropped to the Colt revolver on his hip, then back to his face. Outlaw. Had to be. But something in those gray eyes stopped her from slamming the door. "One night," she said quietly. "Leave the gun outside, and don't lie to my face. I can smell dishonesty like smoke." Jesse nodded, unbuckled his gun belt, and set it carefully on the porch rail. "There are men who want me dead. But I don't shoot first, and I don't shoot the innocent." Half-truth, maybe, but it was enough. She led him to the chair by the fire, fetched her sewing kit and clean rags. The bullet had grazed his thigh, deep enough to bleed, shallow enough to heal with proper care. "This will hurt," she warned, threading the needle. "Already does." Her hands were steady as she cleaned the wound, steadier than they'd been in years. When had she last touched another person? When had anyone needed her steady hands, her quiet competence? Jesse gritted his teeth but made no sound as she stitched him up. Good. She respected men who bore pain without theatrics. "You'll sleep on the settle," she said when she finished. "My bedroom door stays closed. We don't speak of this to anyone." Understood. But as she prepared for bed, Eleanor found herself leaving her bedroom door cracked just slightly, enough to hear if he moved, enough to watch firelight dance across his profile as he dozed, enough to wonder what it might feel like to be needed again. Dawn came quiet after the storm. Eleanor woke to the sound of an axe splitting wood, steady, rhythmic strikes that spoke of a man accustomed to hard work. Through her bedroom window, she watched Jesse in the yard. He'd found Jacob's old coat, the sleeves too short on his long arms. The injured leg held his weight well enough. Each swing of the axe sent cordwood flying, and despite herself, Eleanor found her gaze drawn to the flex of his shoulders, the economical grace of his movements. When she emerged from the cabin with coffee, he straightened, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cold. "Didn't want to be useless," he said, accepting the steaming cup. "Figure I owe you for the doctoring." "You don't owe me anything. My mama raised me better than that." Their fingers brushed as she handed him the coffee. This time, neither pulled away immediately. "Tell me about her," Eleanor said. "Your mother." Jesse's face softened. "Mary Hale, schoolteacher in a town so small, it didn't have a name. She could recite poetry while skinning a rabbit and make Sunday dinner stretch to feed any hungry soul who knocked at our door." He took a sip of coffee. "She died when I was 16. Fever took her quick." "I'm sorry. She'd have liked you. Would have said you had kind eyes." Jesse looked at her directly. "She always could see the good in people, even when they couldn't see it themselves." Heat bloomed in Eleanor's chest. I need to go to town for supplies." But in Prue Landon's general store, gossip flew faster than bullets. The older woman's sharp eyes tracked every item Eleanor selected. Extra bandages, more coffee, a jar of honey. "A lot of supplies for a woman living alone," Prue observed. "Winter's been hard," Eleanor replied carefully. From the back corner, a man Eleanor didn't recognize watched their exchange. Tall, weathered, with the careful stillness of a predator. When their eyes met, he touched the brim of his hat in greeting, but something in his gaze made her skin crawl. She hurried home to find Jesse mending the broken hinge on her front door. He'd rolled his sleeves up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked by old scars. "Thought I heard riders earlier," he said without looking up. "Might want to keep that Winchester close." "Hunters? Maybe. Or maybe just my nerves talking." He tested the hinge, satisfied with his work. "Either way, I should move on soon. Your leg is healing fine, thanks to you." Jesse straightened, and suddenly they were standing very close. "But staying puts you in danger, Eleanor." "I won't have that on my conscience." The sound of her name on his lips sent warmth spiraling through her. "What if I said I wasn't ready for you to go?" Something shifted in his expression. "Ma'am, Eleanor. Just Eleanor. Eleanor." He said it like a prayer. "I'm not a good man to care about. Maybe I'll be the judge of that." The afternoon stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Eleanor taught him to brew the herbal tea that would speed his healing. Jesse showed her how to clean and oil the Winchester properly. Their conversations ranged from books she'd read to places he'd traveled, careful talk that skirted the edges of deeper truths. As evening approached, Jesse insisted on target practice at the tree line. "Just in case," he said, but they both knew it was an excuse to stand close, his hands guiding hers on the rifle stock, his breath warm against her ear as he explained about breathing and aim. The bottle shattered on her third try. "I did it!" Eleanor laughed, the sound bright in the cold air. When had she last felt such simple joy? "You're a natural," Jesse said, but he wasn't looking at the broken glass. He was looking at her, at the flush in her cheeks, the way her eyes sparkled with triumph. The moment stretched taut as a bowstring. Eleanor felt something shift inside her, like ice breaking on a spring river. Jesse's hand came up to her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone. "Eleanor," he whispered. She leaned into his touch. "I know I should be afraid of you." "You should, but I'm not." She met his gaze. "The only thing I'm afraid of is how alive you make me feel." Jesse's control fractured. His mouth came down on hers, gentle at first, then hungry when she responded. Her arms wound around his neck, fingers tangling in his dark hair. He tasted like coffee and possibility, like everything she'd thought she'd lost when Jacob died. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. The rifle lay forgotten in the snow. "We should go inside," Jesse said roughly. Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. As they walked back toward the cabin, she slipped her wedding ring into her coat pocket. The gold felt cold against her fingers, but her heart felt warm for the first time in years. But passion this fierce comes with a price, and someone was already moving through the darkness to collect. That night, the cabin felt electric. Eleanor prepared dinner with trembling hands, hyper-aware of Jesse's presence in the small space. Every glance, every accidental touch, sent sparks through her. After the meal, they sat by the fire. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating an intimate cocoon that felt separate from the harsh world outside. "Tell me something true," Eleanor said quietly. Jesse stared into the fire for a long moment. "I killed a man in Cheyenne, card sharp named Williams, who was cheating soldiers out of their pay. When I called him on it, he went for his gun." His jaw tightened. "But that's not the worst thing I've done." Eleanor waited. "Had a partner once. Tom Bradley. Good man. Terrible judgment. We tried to rob a supply wagon outside Laramie. Not for the money, but because people were starving and the territorial governor was hoarding grain." Jesse's voice grew quiet. "When the cavalry showed up, I ran. Left Tom to face them alone." "What happened to him?" "They hanged him in the town square." Made it a celebration. Jesse finally looked at her. "I should have stood with him. Instead, I was a coward." Eleanor reached for his hand. "You're not a coward now." "How do you know?" "Because you're still here. With me, even though it's dangerous for both of us." The firelight caught in her graying hair, turning it to spun gold. Jesse's breath caught. "You're so beautiful." "I'm an old woman. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." This time when he kissed her, there was no hesitation. Eleanor melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as 7 years of loneliness poured out in desperate kisses. Jesse's lips traced her jawline, her throat, finding the sensitive spot where her pulse hammered wild. "Eleanor," he whispered against her skin, "are you sure?" Instead of answering, she began unbuttoning his shirt with shaking fingers. Jesse caught her hands, stilling them. "If we do this—" "I know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I know what it means." Jesse's control snapped. He swept her into his arms, carrying her toward the bedroom. Eleanor's feet never touched the ground as he kicked open the door, laying her gently on the quilt she'd made in the first year of her widowhood. Moonlight streamed through the window, turning her skin to ivory as Jesse's hands worked the buttons of her dress. She arched beneath his touch, gasping as he discovered the sensitive curve of her waist, the soft swell of her breast. "So perfect," he murmured, lips trailing fire across her collarbone. Eleanor's fingers tangled in his hair as he worshipped her body with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes. This wasn't just desire, this was recognition. 2 wounded souls finding wholeness in each other. Jesse's mouth found her breast, tongue swirling around the peaked nipple until she cried out. His hand slipped lower, fingers dancing across the soft skin of her inner thigh, and Eleanor thought she might die from the pleasure of it. "Please," she whispered, pulling him up for another kiss. Jesse positioned himself above her, their eyes meeting in the moonlight. "I love—" Hoofbeats, multiple riders approaching fast. Jesse rolled away instantly, grabbing for his clothes. Through the front window they saw 3 men on horseback. The leader was the stranger from the general store, now wearing a deputy's badge. His pale eyes swept the cabin like a hawk surveying prey. "Hide." Eleanor was on her feet, pushing Jesse toward the root cellar beneath the floorboards. "Now!" He squeezed through the narrow opening, just as Silas Boone's spurs rang against the porch steps. Eleanor threw the rug back over the hidden entrance, smoothed her skirts, and opened the door with her heart hammering. The pounding on the door made them both jump. Eleanor straightened her robe and walked to the door. Her hand trembled only slightly as she lifted the latch. "Evening, Mrs." Whitlow Silas stepped inside without invitation, his pale eyes scanning the cabin. "Cold night for riding." "What brings you out?" "Tracking a man." "Dangerous sort." He moved through her space like he owned it, noting the 2 coffee cups, the Winchester now propped within easy reach, instead of gathering dust above the mantel. "Jesse Hale. About 6 feet, dark hair, gray eyes. Seen anyone matching that description?" "No." Silas smiled without warmth. "Funny thing about lies, ma'am. They have a particular smell, like guilt and gunpowder." Eleanor's hand drifted toward Jacob's rifle. "I think you should leave. I think you should tell me where he is." The cabin held its breath. Below the floorboards, Jesse waited in darkness while Eleanor faced down a man who'd killed for far less than a bounty. "I live alone," she said steadily. "Always have, since Jacob passed." Silas studied her face, then drew his knife and drove it deep into the doorframe. The blade quivered inches from Eleanor's head. "Just a reminder, ma'am. Law always finds a way back." He left without another word, his footsteps fading into the frozen night. Eleanor's legs gave out the moment the door closed. She sank to her knees and lifted the rug with shaking hands. Jesse emerged from the cellar like something conjured from her deepest fantasies. Dangerous, desperate, and looking at her with naked hunger. They came together without words. Eleanor's mouth found his as 7 years of loneliness collapsed into 7 seconds of desperate need. Jesse's hands tangled in her hair, pulled her against him until she could feel his heartbeat through his shirt. This time, nothing stopped them. Jesse's hands were reverent as they unlaced Eleanor's corset. Firelight painted her skin gold and amber, the curve of her shoulder, the hollow of her throat, the soft swell of her breasts as the fabric fell away. "You're trembling," he whispered. "It's been a long time. We can stop." "No." Eleanor's fingers found the buttons of his shirt. "I don't want to stop." 7 years of untouched skin. 7 years of sleeping alone in a bed, meant for 2. Eleanor had forgotten the weight of a man's hands, the heat of another body pressed against hers. But Jesse was patient, gentle even in his urgency, his mouth soft against her neck as his fingers mapped the landscape of her desire. They made love on the rug before the fire, desperate and tender, rough with need and soft with wonder. Eleanor cried out when he moved inside her, years of loneliness shattering like ice in spring. Afterward, she lay with her head on Jesse's chest, listening to his heart beat slow. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. They dozed until dawn, tangled in each other's arms. But morning brought reality crashing back. Jesse dressed while Eleanor made coffee, both of them moving carefully around what had happened between them. She'd tucked her wedding ring into her pocket during the night, a small rebellion that felt seismic. "I have to go," Jessie said quietly. Staying puts you at risk. Eleanor wrapped provisions in brown paper, her hands steady despite the breaking of her heart. Jacob's coat is in the chest. You'll need it. Jessie pulled on the heavy woolen coat. It fit well enough, though Jacob had been broader through the shoulders. Come with me. The words hung in the air like smoke. Jessie, we could go south. California, maybe. Find a place where no one knows our names. Eleanor caught sight of herself in the mirror. Silver threading her auburn hair, lines at the corners of her eyes, the soft fullness of middle age. I'm too old for running. You're not too old for living. And you're not too old for surviving. Go. Please. Jessie cupped her face in his hands, kissed her with a tenderness that tasted of goodbye. If I could stay, I know. Eleanor, I know. The door opened. Silas Boone stood in the yard, Colt revolver trained on Jessie's heart. Hello, Jessie Hale. 2 more bounty hunters emerged from behind the woodshed and barn, rifles raised. The trap had been set all night, while Jessie and Eleanor made love, while they whispered promises in the dark. Eleanor appeared in the cabin doorway, Jacob's Winchester in her hands. Let him go, she said quietly. Silas laughed, a sound like winter wind through bare branches. Ma'am, you harbored a fugitive. By law, I could arrest you both. Jessie raised his hand slowly, but kept his gun in its holster. Let her be. She's got nothing to do with this. Oh, I think she has everything to do with this? Silas's pale eyes moved between them, taking in Jessie's borrowed coat, Eleanor's mussed hair, the intimacy that clung to them like wood smoke. Question is, what's she worth to you? Everything. Interesting. Silas nods slowly. Let's talk about justice, then. You come with us and we'll take you back to the town jail. There'll be a trial, and then there'll be a rope. The offer hangs in the cold air. Eleanor's knuckles are white where she grips the rifle. She knows, and Jessie knows, what kind of justice Silas is talking about. Jessie's gaze is fixed on Silas. A rope isn't an option for me. It's the only option, Hale. Silas's laugh is a dry, hacking sound. Jessie's eyes flicker to Eleanor one last time, a mix of love and regret in their depths. He was once a coward, but he won't die a coward. He won't surrender. He won't run. Maybe, Jessie says, his voice a low rumble, but I won't die on the gallows. He shifts his hand, and in that instant the choice is made. He chooses to fight. The morning held its breath. Eleanor tightened her grip on the Winchester. 3 men with guns trained on the man she'd come to love. 1 woman with 7 years of grief and 1 night of joy to defend. The mathematics of violence had never been more cruel. Jessie's hand dropped to his gun. He was fast, faster than Eleanor had expected. The Colt cleared leather in a smooth, practiced draw that spoke of countless hours perfecting the motion. In another life, against different men, it might have been enough. But Silas Boone had worn a badge for 15 years before bounty hunting claimed him. His shot rang out while Jessie's gun was still rising. The bullet took Jessie high in the chest, spinning him around and dropping him to the frozen ground. His gun skittered across the yard, coming to rest in a patch of snow that bloomed red beneath the morning sun. No! Eleanor's scream tore through the silence. She was moving before conscious thought could stop her, the Winchester forgotten as she ran to Jessie's side. He lay crumpled in the dirt, blood spreading across the front of Jacob's wool coat. Eleanor. His voice was a whisper, gray eyes finding hers as she knelt beside him. I didn't run. I know. Tears she hadn't shed in 7 years carved tracks down her cheeks. I know, my darling. I know. Jessie's hand found hers, fingers slick with blood. This time, I stayed. His eyes fluttered closed. The hand in hers went still. Eleanor knelt in the yard, holding a dead man's hand, feeling 7 years of loneliness crash back over her like a winter avalanche. But beneath the grief burned something new. Pride. Jesse Hale had died exactly as he'd chosen to live his final day, without running. Boots crunched on snow. Silas Boone approached slowly, his smoking Colt still drawn. "By law," he said quietly, "I should arrest you for harboring a fugitive." Eleanor looked up at him through her tears. "Then do it." Silas studied her face, the defiance mixed with devastation, the way she cradled Jesse's hand like something precious. Something in his expression shifted, became almost human. "Funny thing about laws," he said finally, holstering his weapon. "Sometimes they get in the way of justice." He knelt and closed Jesse's eyes with surprising gentleness. "I don't see anything here but a widow woman living alone in the wilderness." Silas stood, touched his hat brim. "Bury him deep. Wolves come down from the mountains this time of year." Eleanor watched the 3 bounty hunters mount their horses and disappear into the pine forest. The yard fell silent, except for the whisper of wind through bare branches and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. She buried Jesse where they'd practiced shooting, where broken bottles caught the afternoon light like scattered diamonds. No headstone, no marker save for the red bandana she tied to a juniper branch. In Dry Willow, questions were dangerous, and some secrets were meant to stay buried. Prue Landon tried to pry, of course, offered casseroles and condolences for troubles Eleanor never admitted to having. But Eleanor had learned the value of silence. She mended clothes and tended her garden and spoke only, when spoken to. The changes were small, but profound. She cleaned Jacob's Winchester and kept it loaded within easy reach. She planted red wildflowers in the window box, the first flowers she'd grown since Jacob's death. She took the train to Cheyenne once a month, bought books and fabric and small luxuries she'd denied herself for 7 years, and she never wore her wedding ring again. Spring came late that year, but it came. Eleanor stood on her porch one morning, watching snow melt into rushing streams, listening to meadowlarks call across the valley. The red bandana fluttered in the juniper tree, faded now, but still visible. She thought about Jesse often. The way he touched her face in the firelight, the sound of his voice when he said her name, the weight of his choice to stay. Some loves were measured in years, others in heartbeats. Both had their place. She'd spent 7 years believing herself too old for love, too set in her ways for passion, too practical for the kind of romance that changed everything in a single night. Jesse Hale had taught her different, had shown her that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Eleanor Whitlow lived another 23 years in that cabin. She never married again, but she was never truly alone. Love, once kindled, burns eternal, even when the man who lit it rests beneath Wyoming soil. Thank you for listening to this tale of forbidden love and second chances. If it moved you, please like and subscribe for more stories from the American frontier. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from tonight?